Yep, you read the title right. But before we start, just a quick heads up. This video will contain major spoilers for Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul, as well as the BanG franchise. So if you haven't seen them, I suggest watching them first, and you can always come back to this video later. Still here? Great! Welcome to this video essay, where we are diving into two wildly different worlds, BanG, or from now on, I will refer to as Bandori for short, and Better Call Saul. Now at first glance, they couldn't be more different, right? Bandori is a vibrant anime about high school girls forming bands, sharing dreams about music, overcoming insecurities, or navigating fractured friendships, and performing music on stage together. Better Call Saul, meanwhile, is a gritty courtroom and crime drama, which acts as a prequel to Breaking Bad, with cartel shootouts, courtroom chicaneries, and a slow-motion descent into tragedy. But today's essay will not analyze either of those plots. Instead, we are digging deeper into something more personal that both franchises illustrated: siblinghood. Particularly the dynamics between Sayo Hikawa and Hina Hikawa in Bandori anime and game, as well as Jimmy McGill and Chuck McGill in Better Call Saul from the first episode to the very last one. Now, you might be wondering, what the hell do an anime girl duo have to do with a pair of two middle-aged lawyers? And that, my friend, is the point of this video. We are exploring the contrast between the two aforementioned relationships, how they mirror each other, how they differ, and how that led to drastically different outcomes. Both pairs were in conflict at some point, but one found a way to reconcile, heal, and move forward, while the other one, let's just say they practically nuke each other into oblivion out of pure resentment. Before we dive deeper into the analysis, let's introduce the characters I want to mention first, because, not everyone has watched both Bandori and Better Call Saul. In Bandori, Sayo and Hina Hikawa are twin sisters, but they differ significantly in personality. Whereas Sayo is more stiff, serious, and introspective, Hina is cheerful, carefree, and energetic. Furthermore, Hina is also extremely talented at everything. She was born a genius. She could master a skill in a single try. Yep, she's just that good. In contrast, such things would take Sayo a decent bit of practice before she could master them, which made her feel inferior compared to her sister, and that became the core for their conflict throughout the story. As a result, their relationship, although they used to be very close, slowly drifted apart as Sayo intentionally distanced herself from Hina out of resentment and bitterness. In fact, Sayo only picked up music and practiced playing guitar because Hina wasn't doing it. But Hina, being the carefree girl, also started playing music in order to please Sayo and be able to spend more time with her. This obviously backfired badly, as Hina again effortlessly mastered playing the instruments, leading to Sayo's resentment toward her being further deepened. Fast forward a bit, Hina was scouted into the idol agency, the one behind Pastel Palettes, and became part of the idol band after passing the audition without breaking a single sweat, which further complicated the relationship between the two, as Hina now became the representative figure in a major band, whereas Sayo was still scrambling around trying to find a band that fits her. But make no mistake, Sayo was never incompetent. She was still an extremely skilled individual, just not as much as her sister. Hell, if she wasn't good, Yukina would have never invited her to Roselia. And yeah, invited she was. She was accepted into Roselia and became the band's guitarist, as shown in episode of Roselia 1, Promise. Better Call Saul tells the backstory of Jimmy McGill on how he became the man we all know in Breaking Bad.
It's all good, man.
His brother Chuck, however, was never mentioned in Breaking Bad, and thus, Better Call Saul introduces us to this new character, and oh boy, fair to say he was the character that indirectly caused the entire Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad timeline to happen. Chuck McGill, when we first saw him, was a highly respected lawyer, a no-nonsense, always get the job done type of lawyer. He respected the law and worked hard to build his reputation, and eventually partnered up with his associates to establish HHM, one of the biggest law firms in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Jimmy McGill at the time, however, was the opposite of Chuck. He was a petty conman, running scams in Cicero, Illinois for fun, as he has that ability to charm people with his talking and lure them into his scams. He would often get himself in trouble and needed Chuck's help, until one day Chuck made him quit scamming for good and gave him a chance to work in his firm, in the mailroom specifically, which Jimmy agreed to. Jimmy, upon seeing the position that Chuck stood in, wanted to be like him, and thus he started learning the law at the University of American Samoa, an online course, and went on to pass the New Mexico bar exam. He eventually became a lawyer, but Chuck, being resentful towards Jimmy from the start, asked Howard not to hire Jimmy as a lawyer. We get to see another glimpse of Chuck's bitterness towards Jimmy in Season 2, Episode 5, Rebecca, where Chuck told him the story of their family, where their dad ran a small corner store in Cicero. However, Jimmy stole the money from the counter over the years, and the amount added up gradually, which Chuck had figured out to be $14,000 later. So much so that the dad had to close down the store due to financial issues. Season 2, Episode 10, Click, also revealed to us another reason for Chuck's resentment towards Jimmy, being that their parents always favored Jimmy more. Their mother, in the dying moment, called Jimmy's name instead of Chuck, who was literally sitting beside her. Their parents would never think Jimmy would be doing anything bad. That belief, of course, as we all know, is not true, as Jimmy's nature is all about cutting corners and scamming people for his own gains. Let's rewind a bit, because the climax of the conflict lied in the episode Memento, where Jimmy confronted Chuck about why he didn't accept him into the firm. Chuck had a rant about Jimmy, saying that he was not a real lawyer, that he knew Jimmy's true nature about cutting corners and bending the rules, and that Jimmy will hurt people if he bends the law as he pleases. That of which Jimmy had to learn the hard way.
No need to.
And from this point onward, everything spiraled into chaos, with both brothers scheming to sabotage each other, both metaphorically and literally. Through misunderstanding and conflicts, both Sayo and Hina start getting closer bit by bit. Their relationship had long been cold, with Hina being open and clingy, while Sayo remained stiff and emotionless when talking to her, often refusing anything from going out shopping or even small talk. For whenever Hina tried to get close, Sayo would push her away. But as the story went, their relationship became warmer and warmer, and it was actually Sayo who made the promise that one day the two of them would perform on the biggest stage together, and Hina, of course, gladly accepted it. It was thanks to this promise that Sayo practiced playing guitar day and night, until she got so good that even Yukina, upon the first time witnessing her performance, immediately offered her an invitation. As for Hina, despite her sister's resentment toward her, Hina never once returned hate. She could not comprehend Sayo's feeling, sure, but she was more intrigued by them rather than feeling upset. And And throughout the story, we always saw Hina as the one who motivated Sayo when she felt like quitting. Yes, Hina prevented Sayo from quitting music, but more on this part later. This unconditional love and support for her sister really says a lot about Hina's character. She is carefree, but she still cares very deeply. Sayo, for all her envy and resentment toward her sister, eventually cared for her little by little. She started listening to Hina more, treating her better, and hanging out with her more often, something she would have never done back then. After Sayo joined Rosalia, her sole motivation for improving herself was still the promise that she made to Hina about how one day they would stand on stage back to back performing music. Hina, meanwhile, never stopped supporting her sister to the best of her ability. In episode of Rosalia 2, she even rescheduled her work at Pastel Palettes to go and watch her sister's performance at the Future World Fest alongside Rosalia members, proving that she never held a grudge even when she was mistreated or ignored. Also, in the same movie, Hina was waiting for Sayo to return home to be the first one to congratulate her for the success in the contest in the freezing night. Yeah, that was pretty damn wholesome if you ask me. And as their relationship improved gradually, they became closer, so much so that Sayo would sometimes gladly hang out with Hina. She also acted more kindly toward her bandmates, something that only happened after her relationship with Hina was fixed. Now turning to the in-game story, their relationship is demonstrated very well in event stories like Wish Upon a Tanzaku, where both of them, out of coincidence, wish to be able to have fun times together and be closer to each other. In Umbrella for the Autumn Rain event, she once again compared herself to Hina and felt that her guitar skills lacked personality compared to Hina's. That thought haunted her so much that she couldn't concentrate during Rosalia's practicing sessions. We got to see how she processed her thoughts as she eventually realized that Hina looked up to her as a great and reliable elder sister. Sayo apologized for everything she had done to Hina, which in return, Hina gave her a wholehearted scolding for thinking about quitting music. This was referenced in episode of Rosalia 2, which was a really cool Easter egg for those who already read the in-game stories. The long night embracing eternity brought a whole nother layer to the relationship between the two, as Sayo was closer to her goal more than ever. But that made Sayo question herself as to what is her goal beyond that point. Well, she later figured out that she would continue playing anyways because she and her sister were inseparable. And as long as the promise of keeping practicing music stays around, they would forever be together. Also, on a side note, I am relatively new to the game, so I haven't read that much in-game story content. Apologies. In the end, both ended up in Rosalia and Pastel Palettes, very popular bands, like top-of-the-line bands in the Bandori universe. They both succeeded, and their bonds finally felt like family again. Are you feeling happy and optimistic because of the previous story? Well, good. Now time to be miserable. Chuck's conflict with Jimmy not only spiraled into utter chaos, it is also the whole reason why everything in Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad happened the way they did. From Memento onwards, it was constant legal, verbal, and physical bumping back and forth between Jimmy and Chuck. In the episode Fifi, Jimmy, in order to take Mesa Verde to kill, went to Chuck's house to take some documents and counterfeit them, which led to the hearing being cancelled and rescheduled 6 weeks later. This action not only was a heavy blow to Chuck's reputation as a lawyer, but also successfully pulled Mesa Verde back to Kim. Chuck figured this out almost instantly, which probably proves that he really knew Jimmy to the very core. He baited Jimmy to confess the truth while recording the whole conversation in the episode Click by acting all miserable and blaming himself, which made his brother feel bad and thus confess all his forgery works earlier. However, this evidence cannot be used in court, so he worked out another plan to have Ernesto accidentally listen to the tape and alerted Kim as well as Jimmy. This led to Jimmy brute forcing into Chuck's house to destroy the tape, but unbeknownst to him, there was a PI that Chuck hired as a witness. Jimmy was later arrested and pleaded not guilty at the arraignment, and later accepted the PPD offered by Chuck's attorney. Jimmy sincerely apologized to Chuck for his actions at the meditation session, but we all know that was just top-tier acting from him. Later in the episode Chicanery, which was arguably the best episode in the series in my opinion, we got to see the legal battle between the two brothers. Jimmy, with the earlier help from Mike as well as Hugo, baited Chuck into having an absolute rant about him at the bar hearing after being framed as mentally unstable, or to put bluntly, was unhinged. This rant not only embarrassed Chuck in front of the judges, but also significantly diminished HHM's reputation as a whole. Also, in turn, indirectly reduced Jimmy's punishment to just 1 year of suspension in practicing law. In the next episode, Jimmy went to the insurance company to refund his malpractice insurance, but we all know that he was just there to name-dropping Chuck in front of the assistant, including Chuck's breakdown in court, which subsequently got his and his colleagues at HHM's malpractice insurance double in premium. This led to Chuck being forced to retire after some fierce conflict with Howard, threatening to sue HHM and whatnot. At this point, Chuck was robbed of the only thing that he lived for, the law. This event was a heavy blow to his mental health, as his EHS returned and probably became even worse than before. Jimmy reluctantly visited Chuck after listening to Kim's advice, but was only to be met with a cold line.
You've never mattered all that much to me.
This was the final nail in the coffin for their relationship, as just later that day, Chuck burned himself to death in his house by kicking the gas lantern to the floor. From this point onward, Jimmy, now without Chuck, began to embrace his Saul Goodman persona more than ever. In the season finale, Winner, we saw Jimmy faking his mourning and condolence for Chuck's death, but that was again elite acting, as he was able to trick the bar committee into his sincerity and thus was able to practice law again. We never really hear Jimmy mentioning Chuck again throughout the remainder of Better Call Saul and the entire Breaking Bad, until the very last episode of the franchise, both in release and chronological order, Saul Gone, where Jimmy finally confessed his actions that indirectly caused Chuck's death. He finally, once and for all, proved Chuck was wrong all along, because Jimmy McGill can indeed change. In the end, one brother ended up killing himself, burning down his house in the process, while the other became one of the primary reasons why Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad turned out the way they did, with hundreds of innocent people hurt and countless blood spilled in the process. They both collapsed, whilst never getting the chance to sit down and talk like family. So what's the common theme here? Well, as you can probably tell, it's the resentment from the older sibling toward their younger sibling. Despite living in wildly different worlds, both sibling pairs were trapped in the same prison, comparison, not by others, but by themselves. The first common theme is uneven recognition. Both Chuck McGill and Sayo Hikawa felt envy to their siblings. Sayo felt inferior to Hina as her sister always does things better, faster, and more effortlessly than she does. This envy sparked early when they were just kids, where Sayo kept feeling being surpassed by Hina in every shape and form imaginable, and that thought haunted her for the longest time, hence the gradually colder relationship between the two. Chuck is different from Sayo in that he was better than his sibling, particularly in skills and talents. Instead, his envy came from the fact that Jimmy is charming and loved by people with his smooth talking. This was especially reflected by their parents, who did not buy the fact that Jimmy stole a large amount of money from the family business. Couldn't be our precious Jimmy, indeed. The second common theme is the jealousy that turned into resentment. Chuck's grudge also came from the fact that he knew who Sleeping Jimmy was, and that he could never change his corner-cutting nature. He will always lie, he will always hurt people, and despite all that, he is still beloved by people. He will always be the Sleeping Jimmy that Chuck knew so damn well all this time. Sayo's resentment, on the other hand, came from pure jealousy. Her inner voice said, "Why is Hina better than me? Why does she get to play in a popular band while I'm here struggling to find somewhere to fit in? Will I ever be as good as her, or will I forever live in her shadows?" Those thoughts were the primary fuel for her bitterness, as she could never get over the fact that she is worse than her sister in almost every aspect. The last common theme is the inability to communicate honestly. This is where tragedy lies. Sayo actively pushed Hina away and hides her emotion from others, like shown in the episode of Brasilia 1. However, in the end, she figured out her own way to reconnect with Hina and fix the relationship between the two. The same cannot be said about Chuck. Although there were moments when he genuinely wanted to communicate with Jimmy and try to fix their relationship, as shown in the final flashback of So Gone. But as we all know it, such efforts were overshadowed by the sheer hatred he had for Jimmy. Here is something I haven't mentioned before, and that is the younger sibling factor. The path towards Sayo's success or Chuck's downfall wasn't single-handedly paved by themselves. In fact, their siblings played a major role in shaping the outcomes. Both Hina Hikawa and Jimmy McGill were treated badly by their elder siblings, absolutely. But whereas Jimmy tried to sabotage Chuck's reputation and his career as an act of revenge, Hina tried fixing the relationship between her and Sayo. No matter how many times she was pushed away, she kept loving her sister unconditionally. And even if you think that Jimmy's actions are justified because he just wanted Mesa Verde back to Kim, that's fair. But why did he intentionally try to make the malpractice insurance agent flag Chuck as a potential liability? Yeah, because he wanted Chuck to get into trouble for everything that his brother has done to him. And that was exactly where he went too far, to the point of no return. Hina, on the other hand, actively tried to support her sister to the best of her ability, bonding, preventing her from quitting guitar, as well as encouraging her from saving Roselia when the band was literally on the verge of collapse. In the end, her efforts were paid off, as they were able to be close to each other again. And perhaps the biggest and most heartbreaking contrast is that Jimmy wanted to antagonize Chuck for everything he had done to him, while Hina wanted to support Sayo in spite of her sister's hostility for her. And after Chuck's death, Jimmy acted like he never existed, even though we all know that he is constantly haunted by Chuck's death, because like Chuck said, Sleeping Jimmy never changed after all. Hina, she was carefree. She couldn't understand any of Sayo's emotions, but she never stopped thinking that her sister is the coolest and the closest person to her either. Maybe that was her magic. Maybe that's what made Sayo realize her mistakes. Maybe that's what fixed their relationship. In summary, both Sayo and Chuck had a sense of hostility toward their siblings, but for a reason couldn't be more different. Whereas Sayo's resentment was driven by her desire to prove herself, to be able to catch up with her sister, and to perform on the biggest stage together, Chuck's bitterness was driven by his ego and his hatred toward his younger brother, as he made it his mission to sabotage Jimmy's every accomplishment and effort, and then kick him down to the bottom, where Chuck had always believed Jimmy belonged all this time. Sayo wanted to be just as good as Hina, to be able to reach higher peaks alongside her sister, whereas Chuck wanted to always be superior to Jimmy and never wanted to see him succeed. The real tragedy? The fact that one pair of siblings came into conflict and then moved forward, while the other never crossed that bridge. They came into conflict and then collapsed altogether. Sayo used her envy to improve herself and to fix her relationship with Hina. Chuck used his envy to burn out Jimmy, and in turn, his house alongside with himself. In the end, Sayo and Hina, for all their efforts, successfully fixed the relationship, and now they both live happily together as they play for world-famous bands. A truly happy ending to their stories. As for Chuck and Jimmy, their relationship could have been fixed, but never was, because they refused to sit down, to open up like brothers, and perhaps that was their real tragedy. A real grim and regretful ending to their relationship. So, what is siblinghood? Maybe it's neither pure love nor pure hate, but the ability to tolerate each other and grow from it even when you are in constant conflict. Envy can be a double-edged sword. What matters is how you use it. You can use it to fuel your own determination, to push yourself to improve, and to earn each other's respect. Or you can use it to burn down everything you and the others have built. Siblinghood is one of the most unique relationships there is, because it's neither ride or die friendship, nor is it unconditional parental love. It is the messy cycle of conflict, tolerance, acceptance, growth, and sometimes understanding. This one's for those of you who have siblings. Now ask yourself, how well can you live in someone's shadow? How long can you stand watching them succeed while you fail? Can you go to sleep with the fact that in the eyes of others, you are not you are their sibling? If you can overcome such difficulties and come out with your head high, then congratulations, you understood the definition of siblinghood. You don't have to love them. You just have to live with them and still choose not to hate them. That is siblinghood. Thank you for watching the video. This is the first time I've dedicated myself to making a proper YouTube video. It has been genuinely fun sitting down and doing all of the researching and writing the script. I hope you find the video entertaining, and if you did, please consider hitting that like and subscribe button, or share this video with one of your friends. It helps a lot. And if I got anything wrong, like a mistake in telling the plots, or you disagree with my text, feel free to drop a comment below. See you next time on the channel. Goodbye.